I'm Van Sebastian, here with my co-host S.A. Bez Collins for this week's Written on the Edge Season 9, Episode 24 interview. We'll be talking with Mark Olmsted and discussing his memoir. So, let's get to know our guest. Mark Olmsted has been a writer since graduating from the NYU School of Arts in 1980. After over a decade in Manhattan, he moved to California to pursue screenwriting and take care of his brother, who died of AIDS in 1991. Gay and HIV plus himself, Mark self-medicated through the worst of the plague years with crystal meth, which led to a conviction for drug dealing in 2004 and 9 months in prison, and his book, Ink from the Pen. This story was detailed in an in-depth article that appeared on GQ.com, and he has emerged into a life of recovery and activism, writing hundreds of essays for the Huffington Post and his personal blog. In 2011, he entered the graduate humanities programs at Mount St. Mary's University, obtaining a master's degree with a specialization in creative writing in 2013. At present, he edits subtitles for a post-production house. He also does translation for French and script doctoring, and Mark's latest venture is writing children's books with Marianne Hegg. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm
Our
really looking
pleasure.
forward to it. Yeah.
So it sounds like you've had quite the journey.
That is a correct 3 words to describe
And I
quite the journey.
and I know part of our main talking points are why you decided to be creative. So I'm going to hold off on that question that I normally ask first and instead ask what you want folks to know about the journey that got you to the point where you wrote the memoir.
Uh, that life is really about finding the themes for a writer. If you can find the themes in your work and apply them to your life, or find the themes in your life that you can apply to your work. And so I had to have the French word is recul, which means seeing things a bit from a distance, perspective after I got out of prison. And I saw that, there were some themes to my life, which was an early adaptation to mendacity, from learning to lie about being gay in the 70s, which is what you did, to later on lying about being HIV positive, and then lying about my drug use, and which came about because of AIDS, and then grief, because I lost so many people, and how people react differently to grief. And I, reacted in a sort of mad genius sort of way, as a friend used to call me. It was kind of true, because after my brother died in 1991, I was in charge of settling his affairs, because we lived together. And I just decided to forget to tell the state that not to send his disability checks anymore.
Oh
I
no.
forgot to cancel his bank account, and which was much better than mine, because he was a doctor, and then forgot to cancel his credit cards. Because for me, I was like, I'm next. I'm on the 2-year plan, and I have a bucket list that I can't afford.
Mm-hmm.
And so I used his credit cards, and then when I came up to the limit on them, I forged his death certificate to change the year that he died, so that a year later, I would send it in, and I would insure it, and then it was all paid off. And this led to, then his license came in the mail for renewal. And I said, well, we look enough alike. It would be nice to have this ID. I went down to the DMV, and she looked at his license and tossed it. We looked enough alike. I took the picture, put my fingerprint. So I had his ID. And for 10 years, I had this double life that allowed me using his credit and forging first his death certificate and then my own. And as I started to deal drugs, as you know, I became addicted to getting away with things. And the biggest thing I got away with was I didn't die. And you know, I came pretty close, but I was one of those lucky ones who managed to stagger, you know, to the meds. And then by the time I could have locked in changing my life, because I actually had a future again.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I don't write about this in the book, but I've written about other things. It's like uh, I did a really good job of excising the future from my brain as a defense mechanism. And when you figure out you're going to live again and you can really believe in it, stuffing that back in, it's like I ripped out all the pages from my to-do agenda calendar of, you know, what to do the next year, and I'm trying to tape them back in. And by that time I was thoroughly I addicted to meth, because that helped me live completely in the present.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would get high, I'd put my chaps on, I'd get on the computer, and I knew what my goal was, and you know, accomplished it within a couple hours. Um, and you can do that for for a certain amount of time, and then you get caught. And I got caught. I got out of it with a slap on the wrist, first time offender, and I, for some really warped reason, well, not so warped. I think after all these years that the suspense was killing me, and I chose, what I did is I sent in a final forged death certificate to the cops, and they closed everything. You know, I wrote it in posing as my own brother,
Mm-hmm.
shocked to find out that I had this parole meeting. The family had no idea that I had been arrested, and it worked. And unfortunately, I was so addicted, I got sucked into um, the dealing again, because people were like, "Oh, can you make an exception for me?" You know, and I wasn't ready to go and get sober yet. So I got arrested again, and this time they were sending me to the big house. So unfortunately, you know, I mean, I know this is about the book, and I want desperately to talk about the book, but
Mm-hmm.
I have the kind of story that it's almost impossible to not go through that prequel. You
Right.
know? So there you have it. So I got my wish. I got the closest thing to death without dying is prison, and it 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 offered a closure, a complete a closure of that part of my life, and reopened my writing part, because I started sending letters to my wonderful sister and to everybody, but in particular, she said uh, very soon into my incarceration, she said, "Mark, these are great," because I was just capturing, and she made sure that I was really turning over a new leaf. You know, because she says, I'm helping you." She hired the lawyer, but I need to know that you're committed, and I was,
Mm-hmm.
and she started typing them up on a blog. So I would write a letter a day, which is turned into a blog entry. I'd send it to her. As soon as she'd get it, she'd type it up. So almost in real time, all my friends, and I had many friends over the years who were cheering me on and who had not known a thing, obviously, about my double life.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I had to retrieve all my non-barnacle friends, meaning the druggies
Mm-hmm.
who every drug dealer attracts, you know, and you support. And I had to, you know, revive all those relationships and those friendships. And and then as I started observing the life around me in complete sobriety, um, it, I found, this is how I live in the present. And when you can learn to live in the present again in a place like prison,
Mm-hmm.
then you can definitely learn to apply those skills when you get out, which I have. And I also learned to write again. uh, in a way that was very helpful after prison, because when I became a blogger and worked for Huffington Post and Medium, it was that same sort of write an entry a day and rewrite it and edit it, and you know, so I didn't even know I was training myself. I didn't even know I was writing a book. I was just paying attention. And these guys, I swear to God, they had some sort of, they were like my collective muse. That
Uh-huh.
they came up, and if you read the book, you'll see this. That they came up with a little playlet a day, a little one-act play that I could just document.
Uh-huh.
Like I don't know if you reach Sean Dietrich, who's wonderful on Facebook, but he's a storyteller who just tells about his life, and he lines at the airport, cafes, whatever. He managed to capture these wonderful little short stories, and I found myself doing that. And
Were these like you had mentioned in pre-interview notes and stuff that there were some absurdities of incarceration? Is this kind of what you're talking about?
it's yes, I mean, um, there was definitely absurdities of incarceration. I mean, a very unnatural thing for human beings to put other human beings behind bars, and these are largely forgotten men. And I write about going down to court twice, and the bus was on Melrose Avenue, which was right next to my old house, and seeing all these people through the gates of the bus windows, and seeing them, it was almost like, it's like, please, you're bothering me. I'm trying to go to work, and I don't want to think about you people.
Hmm.
And I vowed, I still do this when I pass close to Twin Towers. If I pass a bus like that, I wave. And if I pass Twin Towers, I try to send what I call a spling for those guys in solitary who are looking out of a tiny, tiny window and can just see the highway in the distance. Because I needed those splings when I was in there. Just a thought. And
Hmm.
and then in that context, all these forgotten men who were showing up as individuals that were far more complicated than their mugshot or the crimes they did. And it was like, this was an opportunity for me to really like see if I can bring a character to life in a paragraph. Because some of these guys that appear, I was in a waiting room with them, or a holding place, and then I was transferred to 4 different places. So necessarily, you don't really build many friendships of long duration. You know,
Hmm.
um, and I'm just very thankful to them. And I also never learned their last name, so I don't have to worry about sharing any royalties.
Nice.
But they weren't big readers, and I don't think they'll ever discover the book. Although I did try to send the book to the Chino Library, with the last place that I was, and I never got a response from the librarian. So I'm hopefully they
Huh.
put it up, but um,
I know each library has their own acquisition rules, so maybe.
it's I know a lot of people were like want desperately to give their books away, but just for sheer logistical reasons, it's very difficult. They don't have the space, the intake. Uh,
Right.
yeah.
So let's talk about the book. Memoir specifically. Did you write it chronologically?
Well, yes, it's very much chronological to the blog entries that I wrote, the letters that I wrote to my sister,
Okay.
um, uh, and then I inserted. I was afraid that I wrote a bunch of short stories about my childhood, my very idyllic childhood. Spent many summers in France, because my mom's French, for my mother, so that she would know that she hadn't screwed up. She was a wonderful mother, and these were ways to remind her of exactly what a wonderful childhood she gave us. And I thought that because I had written them in prison, and I thought it wouldn't hurt for the reader to have a little break from the bleak.
Hmm.
I inserted 4 of those within this, the the book, um, and perhaps I didn't need them, but I liked them, and uh, because they saved me too. Because sometimes there are points where going into my, like, when I would write about my child in particular, the walls would go away, and as any writer should have that rush of just entering another world,
Hmm.
and you know uh, there's an enormous amount of reading in prison. People that don't realize that's how a lot of the prisoners kill time. So there's more literacy, but those who are not very literate have a really tough time of it,
Hmm.
and they're the ones who don't get any mail either, and they would break my heart. I remember one when I was in Birch Hall, which was a protective custody dorm, and I noticed every time there was mail call, he would go into the bathroom because he never got mail, and
Oh.
I got so much mail that I was told that I set a record one day. People would go from, because I wrote to everybody, and the guard would go from bunk to bunk, and he would say, Smith, Jones, one letter, nothing for you, nothing for you, and then Olmsted, Olmsted, Olmsted. Seven. One day I got 7 pieces of mail, and uh, one guy yelled out, "God damn it, save some for us!"
Nice.
And luckily, my brilliant sister would send me. She found out all the things you could send, and she would send much colored paper and colored pencils. And the day that happened, she sent me an envelope. And as soon as mail call was over, I was like, okay, who needs art supplies? And a lot of these guys who, if they didn't read, they would paint, they would draw,
Hmm.
and I would give them, the tougher the better. You want a red pen? How about a green pen? Why do you borrow from here? This is lovely. My sister had a sort of uh, instinctive brilliance about how she could help me, and that turned into one of my, I think I call it save some for us. And one guy who also said, man, if I had a family like that who sent me 7, I would never be here. And
Yeah.
as I write in the book, and it's like, but I had a particular talent for fucking up so brilliantly that, no, it's true. I didn't meet anybody like me, because, I really, but what was I going to say? It's like, yeah, but this wasn't a process uh, that happened like you might imagine it, where I was just like a bad seed. Over 15 years of living with AIDS and death and fear and drugs, there was a slow. I
Right.
moved from.
Yeah. Let's be clear what the muse was in that
Right.
scenario.
Yeah.
It wasn't, your typical, and I think partially, the heartbreaking part of these men who are neglected is the fact that it's an indictment on our society. And I
Hmm.
think that men in general are in far more trouble than, and there's a guy, a professor going around here, I think his last name is Galloway, Scott Galloway, I think. And he's been promoting the fact that men and boys are in trouble. And I think that the institutions that, you took part in also needs to be exposed and written about, because I think that's one of the things that we get so wrong in Western society. We write these people off, and we never really give them a way of reconnecting with their humanity. And I think, it's almost like, there should be an organization that, because there are a lot of lonely people out there in the world too. And, connect a lonely person up with somebody in prison and have them write to each other. And, I mean, might be surprised what would happen along that. But, it's like little things we as a society tend to forget. And I think the beauty of what you've done with this book is you've kind of put those narratives forward again to say, here is what goes on. And, you know, the fact that you say that that one guy, it broke your heart because he was just disappear rather than face the fact that no one would write to him. You know, I think that that's a really beautiful thing to capture. And it's a way of reminding people these are human beings, you know, and through no fault of their own, in one way or another, society has failed them. And, you know, and I think, you know, in your case, because of your writing off your future, you know, you didn't give any fucks because you thought you were out of them to give, you know. And I think that the two narratives work really well together in creating a larger conversation. So I applaud you for writing this, for taking the time to write this.
And at the same time, I was one of the only guys who was saying I was completely guilty. I completely deserve this sentence. And my parole officer afterwards, I said, you know, I'm definitely the only one from whom she heard, you know, this system really worked for me. I thank you. It got me sober in a way that if I was still, you know, it's very hard. You can get drugs in prison, but, you know, you're asking for it because they will find your home address and visit if you owe anything. And that's a nightmare. So I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to screw up, but I had 9 months of enforced sobriety to give me a good start, running start. And the other thing is, when I started writing a lot in the Huffington Post after I got out about specifics about incarceration from a sociological point of view. And I wrote one called Biography of an Inmate, in which I culled a lot of the biographical aspects of these guys that I seem to see over and over. And one was like a single mother who had a bad who was a little loosey-goosey and then turned into a evangelical Christian who then couldn't control her son, usually men who also raised their siblings. And then what never gets counted is that they're exposed to an enormous amount of death at an early age, because the amounts of diabetes, lung cancer, alcoholism, and then obviously gun violence in poor communities means that none of them hit 18 without as many scars that it took me 15 years of AIDS to have. And I could deal with that grief as an adult who, as a gay man, was allowed to show their emotions and allowed to say, and not as an inner city kid with the culture that was like, don't show your feelings and be tough, and vulnerability is weakness. And that's why they, at least when I was in prison, I don't think it's changed much, they have such a hostility toward gays. It's the idea that if you're gay, you're passive, and if you're passive, you're vulnerable. And these guys grew up in homes where they got hit by belts and hairbrushes and stepfathers who often often the victim of sexual abuse, not talked about, completely taboo, but it was revealed to me after a few in-depth conversations. And so then we send them out in the world without a college degree. A lot of them are, you know, could have been brilliant students if they were raised with my advantages, and an encyclopedia in the house, and parents who sat down and helped them with their homework and sent them places like France, but never had that opportunity. So it was like a life of crime, with fast cash and women and luxury, or fast food kind of career where the only thing that keeps me in the straight and narrow is church. And a lot of these guys were, you know, and so they would look at me as an openly proud gay man and they'd be like, what? Because for them, you know, they would fall off. There was good and bad according to the church, and once they were bad, they felt they were irredeemable, and the
Mhm.
Jesus in their mind was like a lifeguard who pulls them to shore by knocking them out so they don't struggle. So it's a very punitive uh, religious psychology. And and they couldn't believe. One asked, are you saying if you had a pill to turn you straight, you wouldn't take it? And I was like, no, because I like being gay. And it was like they had never. And I was like, for these groups of men, it is my obligation for them to be able to say, yes, I met a gay, self-affirming gay man, because the ones they met and they knew of were all on completely on the down low, particularly with the black guys.
Mhm.
I mean, they were just. I mean, they were in a lot of trouble if it was known.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Is there anything else about Ink from the Pen that you want readers to know about that we haven't asked?
My favorite review, which actually was from a friend who said, more entertaining than any prison memoir has a right to be. That it's not a bleak read, and particularly when I did a second marketing push from 2022 when I finally was able to afford to get a narrator for the audiobook, and he's Michael Crouch, and he is fantastic. I followed him from several other books that he'd done, and I thought he was so fabulous. I said, and I was amazed that he was available, and I paid him, and it's particularly entertaining. It was like, oh, and when you haven't read it for a while, and then you hear it, and it's like, well, that's funny, and it's like, who you came up with that? It managed to surprise me, and uh, there's there was one scene where they noticed I get a lot of mail, but as they were suspecting that I was gay, it was like, hey, you get a mail from your girlfriend, Mark? Like, and everyone kind of knew that I didn't. Probably that was a fictitious girlfriend. I said, nah, she can lick everything but a stamp. And I said that just at the right time at a breakfast table where people had been leaning ahead to hear the answer. And the fact that I could make these guys laugh afterwards, you're all right, Mark. And that's a big secret I learned. That laughter it was a big secret weapon. And I was very grateful. And my father was a bit of a drinker. And he'd kind of turned into Ed McMahon at the dinner table. So he'd tell a joke or a story, but he'd always screw up the punchline or some element that made it funny. And I would come in as the Johnny Carson to save the day and to make it funny and to save my dad. And that skill of being able to react on your feet and break the tension was invaluable. So that's when I say creativity is one of the best survival skills there is. That includes just having a nimble brain that's willing to think outside of the box at all moments and to observe around you and to find fodder, before for a witty remark if you're lucky enough to be at a dinner party, but also if you're a writer that you can sprinkle on into your writing.
See, you can use your mad genius for good.
Yes, exactly.
Now go out and tell all the other villains in the comic book world.
Yes. There's no reason to be
Fucker, you got this wrong.
Don't be evil and you could be funny.
Awesome. All right. Are you ready for our get to know you questions?
Sure.
Take it away,
All
Piss.
right. So in this year of digging deeper, what is your favorite writing snack or drink?
I am a bit addicted to my soda stream with a little colored a little colored flavor fruit punch, which I have next to me every day.
There you go. There you go.
I'm supposed to drink a lot of water, but it doesn't quench my thirst unless I have a little flavored in it.
Yeah, well, there you go. Hey, for me, it's peach iced tea, so I get it.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So what books did you read growing up?
So I read a lot of the typical bestsellers of the time of the 70s, Leon
Mm.
Uris, Exodus, and I remember The Arms of Krupp I actually got through, and uh, I snuck up to read Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Sex. That was on my parents' book stand, and then the chapter on homosexuality scarred me for years. It was horrible. And then I read all the books that you read in high school classes, but uh, I discovered the W and the M's. Oscar Wilde I discovered at 17 when I was a counselor at a summer camp for the developmentally disabled. And at night, after lights out, I would curl up and I read his plays first, and then I read Portrait of Dorian Gray, and then through college, the M's, Mom, who's one of my favorite writers, and Maupassant, whose short stories I absolutely love. And he sort of, as I double majored and I went to France, then I started reading a lot of the 19th century French writers. Zola, I adore Zola, etc. So since then, eclectic is my watchword. And you never know what's going to be next. But I listen to an audiobook whenever I go to the gym, and that's been a great way to make sure I read like a book a month. And
Any queer writers amongst that list?
yeah, a fair amount.
And did you discover them early in life, or was it much later in life that you discovered these writers?
Well, I discovered Mary Renault early in the 20s, and I regularly read her, and my favorite book is probably The Persian Boy. And then recently, Madeline Miller, The Song of Achilles. And of course, Dancer from the Dance,
Yeah.
marked me back in the 70s. And one of the reasons I finally broke through and got to write an article for a Gay and Lesbian Review about the different kind of privileges I discovered through prison, including gay privilege, because I was in the gay dorms when I was first arrested downtown, and that saved my life, because I think I would have, the main line would have killed me. And I was just so excited because Andrew Holleran is like a contributor number one, and I was like, he's going to read me. He's going to read me. And I sort of have always sort of worshipped his writing. And then there's a few gay books that I just read once and recently. All the Beautiful Things, or something about from an Iranian writer who wrote about a three multi-generational, that was story about going back to Iran, a queer story, and that was very good. And after this interview was over, I'm going to think of
Of course, yeah. You always remember all the things like at 2 a.m. when you've got no one to tell.
But I try to make sure I have James McBride in my queue, and Percival Everett's James also is coming next. I'm reading Isabel Allende now, Japanese Lover.
Cool.
So I have this theory that the books that you're supposed to read find you.
Yep,
because
absolutely. I get that.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you go down the list of 250 greatest books, I haven't read that. I haven't read that. But I.
Yeah, the to be read list can go on forever. All right. Well, getting back to our list, who has been the biggest supporter of your writing?
Oh, my sister is.
Yeah, I kind of thought that was. Yeah.
Typing up the blogs, and then she has a beautiful home in Seattle, and she's the best grandmother in the world. And so I go up once a year, and I try to time it when the grand nieces and nephews are around, because two of them have moved to New York and they come and visit. And and I'll mention her again when we go into the hobbies, and you'll see why.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, are you a morning person or a night owl?
You know, it's what I'm not. I'm not an afternoon person because you can see I'm fairly hyper and energetic all the time. And I very often, I have a very heavy workload. I edit film subtitles for a living. And very often after dinner, I have to go back to work. And so, and I had years of being a night owl. And, you know, when you're a crystal meth addict, you're definitely a night owl. But these days, it's much more sensible, but I need my afternoon nap, you know, and I'm so
totally get that.
relieved that I can work from home because around 2:33, it's like, you know, and when you're able to have, instead of just like a doze, which is a little meditative, where you don't really go to sleep, but I actually sleep. That's like, yeah, I want to parade. I want to post about it on Facebook. I just,
All right.
so,
Well, what's your favorite hobby outside of writing?
so when I go to my sister's every year, she has what we call the art cave. She's a self-taught artist, and we do art in her studio for 3 days. And I have art all that I've done there, but also here all over my house. I love to use collage and mixed media and drawing and sometimes computer stuff. I do a lot of fun Photoshop, what I call hybrid art, and memes to death, you know, because I'm pretty adept, and I like to keep people entertained on my feed.
There you
And
go.
you know, I think they're mostly very funny until some of them come up in my memories on Facebook, and I'm like, that really wasn't very witty. It was super. And then a lot of them come up about, you know, how I made fun of Romney so much in 2012, and it was like, oh, that we would have a Republican Party that was like
Yeah,
Romney.
right.
Party is like, what were you complaining about? You know.
All right.
Yep.
Well, has writing and publishing a book changed the way you see yourself?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was so important to me. You know, I was a screenwriter for years, and I came very close to getting some films made. And I had one film that got very close. The director died of me of lung cancer, and then we got another director, and then he died of AIDS. The director, Norman Renee, was a very well-known gay director, did Longtime Companion, and coming that close to getting something made, because I had the papers from MGM drawn up, and
Oh yeah, it's a tough business. It's
yeah,
not an easy business to get
it
something to
it
happen.
uh, it really it fed into my drug addiction, into my feeling of like, you know, and so, and it took me a while to write this book after prison because um, I couldn't manage to wrap my hands around the editing process. And all those Huffington Post and those mediums really helped because, and then when my mother died in 2015, I was suddenly weirdly freed, and I realized that I'd been inhibited by the idea that she was going to reread and relive everything I went through, that she had gone through. And I wrote the book in 6 months. So you know, it's the whole, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, this thing will be on my bookshelf, and on the bookshelf of about 1,000 people who bought it, and hopefully I won't see it too soon in and out of the closet. Okay, but even so, then that's fine, because someone else will read it, you know.
Right. Okay. On to our last question. How do you celebrate when you finish a book?
Well, I've only finished one, and yeah, I can't. I post stuff on Facebook. I just
Okay.
announce it, and then I wait for the, you know, stuff
Well,
to come in.
see, you missed an opportunity. You should have Zoomed with your sister, and you guys could have just danced around.
In the art cave.
Well, you know, what she would do is, you know, I can afford it now, but right when I finished it, she would send me a ticket and I would go up and we'd do art
Oh,
for
well,
3
there you
days.
go.
And going to my sister's is like going to retreat. I get fabulous food and great company and play with my incredibly cute, grandniece and nephews. And then we do art, which is just the most fun.
Yeah, nothing better than that. Well, you
Yeah,
made it through the list, so bravo.
Okay.
Yes.
Yay.
So do you have any appearances or dates to share with people? Are you working on
What
something
I
new?
have is that I had a much lengthier podcast that will be 3 episodes long
Wow.
from a podcast called Everything is Stories. Because, after I published the book and it was read by a reporter for GQ, and he did a story about the whole trajectory that I mentioned, and that got optioned by Warner Brothers.
Mhm.
And for 36 months, it looked very close that, then this dropped out and he dropped out and Matt Bomer was going to do it. And then he had to go do Fellow Travelers, and that COVID screwed up everything. So, but Mike Martinez, who's had heard about it through the story, and he said, we are you interested in doing a podcast? And it was 12 hours of interview that he's culled into 3 hours. And
Wow.
we almost got into Tribeca, but we didn't make the cut. But they said, they wrote a personal letter of rejection saying, this is how close it was. So that's going to be up in probably October, 3 final episodes. And I'm thinking, if I wasn't so travel phobic, which is a weird thing that's happened in the past few years, I want to go to New York and create some sort of event around it. But he might do that, so we'll see. But no, I don't have any appearance. This is my big claim to fame right now, your podcast.
Woohoo. Well,
Yeah.
so what's the best place for people to follow you to get your memes and your artwork, but also the announcements about October?
Yeah, I'm if you friend me on Facebook, if you write a little note just in case, I saw you on the road podcast. Also, there's a Mark Olmsted writer page people can friend me as. It's pretty easy to note when just don't friend me and then immediately start private messaging me with, hi, how you doing, what's up? It's like, no, I don't want to flirt. I'm happily married for several years, and that's so early years of Facebook.
Yeah, right.
But,
so girl, move along.
Yes. It's like, I only my old friends, like since childhood, will private message me. Otherwise, comment. I'll comment on yours, and then we'll get to know each other over time.
Exactly.
Yep.
That's
otherwise, if you don't have big boobs, I will allow you to friend me because you're not catfishing or something.
Yeah, right. If you're not a
was-
Russian bride or a Russian bride-to-be's, right?
I was about to ask for final words of wisdom, but that sounded pretty wise right there.
Well, the one thing that I did develop a philosophy that I wrote down that I still live by. I realize it hasn't changed much since I was 15, but that this is the sound of music that from the Mother Superior. And at one point, after at some point, she goes, "I always try to keep faith in my doubts, Sister Margaretto," and that's my philosophy, is like, live in the question mark, and you can have faith in your doubts. And faith is a verb. It's not a destination. I don't know what I have faith in. It's a noun. I'm saying it's a noun, anyway, but you can
follow you. We follow you
without having faith in everything,
Right.
an intransitive verb, I guess, something like that. So those are my final words of wisdom. And the other thing is, and I know I'm going over, is that when you're going into a terrible experience like prison, or your lover's in the hospital with cancer, or your mother, I mean, we all go through them, is to say the little mantra, I will meet people through this experience that I will be unable to meet, to imagine my life not having met. And some experiences are valuable just for having lived through them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was smart enough to tell myself that mantra before I started in prison, and it was completely true, because I can't really imagine not having written this book now.
Right.
I mean, would I make different choices that wouldn't take me to prison if I could relive it? Yes, but this is very much
Lemonade from lemons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one.
Love it. Love it.
That part right there.
Say what? Beyonce, what? Okay.
All right, folks, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Mark Olmsted for joining us. Mark, thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Baz. And Vince.
Our pleasure. Well, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. So if you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. The show is produced by Roe Ravens Media. For disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.ropepodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Bye-bye now.
What's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.